Hey everyone, Steve here. Let's talk about something we all face in the workshop: epic fails. It happens to everyone, even me. I remember one project vividly. It was a beautiful, sleek media cabinet I was building. From the outside, it looked absolutely perfect. The finish was like glass. The doors were perfectly aligned, and the minimalist design was exactly what I had envisioned. I felt so proud looking at it. I thought, this is it. This is one of my best pieces yet. I even took a few pictures, ready to show it off. It was a moment of pure satisfaction, the kind that makes all the sawdust and long hours feel completely worth it. But then came the moment of truth. My plan was to add adjustable shelves inside. I had drilled the holes for the shelf pins before assembly, or so I thought. When I went to put the first shelf in, it wouldn't sit flat. It wobbled like a seesaw on a playground. I was confused for a second. I measured the shelf, thinking maybe I had cut it wrong, but it was perfectly square. Then a cold feeling of dread washed over me as I realized the real problem. My perfectly drilled rows of shelf pin holes were not aligned. One row was a full quarter-inch higher than the other, from front to back. My heart just sank. All that work, all that time spent making the outside look flawless, and the inside was a complete disaster. It felt like a punch to the gut. The cabinet was already fully assembled and glued. Taking it apart was not an option without completely destroying it. I just stood there, staring at my beautiful, useless box. My mind raced with frustration. How could I have made such a basic mistake? I had measured everything so carefully, but I must have measured from the wrong edge on one of the panels. It was a small error that created a massive, almost invisible problem until the very end. This one simple error created a cascade of new problems for me to solve. The cabinet was meant to hold heavy electronics, so wobbly shelves were not an option. My initial reaction was to just give up, to maybe smash the thing and start over, but that would mean throwing away hours of work and a lot of expensive hardwood. I had to find a solution. The project, which was 99% complete in my mind, was suddenly miles away from being finished. It was a harsh reminder that in woodworking, the smallest details can make or break the entire project, no matter how good it looks on the surface. Another time, impatience completely got the best of me. I was working on a set of 6 matching dining chairs. This was a big project, and I had a deadline I was trying to meet. I wanted to get them done for a family gathering. So, I started rushing. Instead of carefully marking and cutting each piece one by one, I tried to batch everything out too quickly. I stacked panels to cut them all at once, thinking I was being efficient. I zipped through the joinery, barely checking my measurements as I went. I was in get-it-done mode, and my focus on quality took a back seat. The consequences of my haste became painfully clear during the first chair assembly. The mortise and tenon joints were sloppy. Some were too tight, and others were so loose they barely held together. The legs weren't square, and the whole frame felt wobbly and weak. It was a mess. I had been so focused on speed that I had forgotten the fundamentals. I realized that my attempt to save time had actually created a massive new job for myself. I now had a pile of poorly cut parts for 6 entire chairs. The motivation I had at the start was completely gone, replaced by a deep sense of regret. Let's break down the lost time. I had already spent about 10 hours cutting all the parts for the 6 chairs. Now I had to go back and fix them. For some pieces, I could trim them down and use a shim, but for most of them, the mistakes were too big. They were firewood. I probably lost about 60% of the wood I had prepared. I spent the next 2 days, probably another 15 hours, just remaking the parts I had ruined. So, my attempt to rush through the project in a weekend cost me an extra 2 days of work and a lot of expensive material. This failure taught me a crucial lesson about patience. In woodworking, rushing is never faster. It almost always leads to mistakes that cost you more time, more money, and more frustration in the long run. It is so much better to work slowly and deliberately. Measure twice, cut once is a cliché for a reason. It's true. Taking an extra minute to double-check a measurement or properly set up your jig is always worth it. That experience completely changed my workflow. Now, I see the process itself as the goal, not just the finished product. Sometimes a project fail isn't your fault at all. It can be caused by a faulty tool or bad materials. I once experienced this in the most dramatic way possible. I was building a large river table, the kind with a stream of colored epoxy running between two live-edge slabs of wood. I had spent a fortune on a gorgeous slab of black walnut. I built the mold perfectly, sealed every edge, and mixed the epoxy exactly according to the instructions. Everything was going smoothly. I poured the beautiful, deep blue epoxy and left it to cure for 3 days. The disaster struck when I came back to check on it. I noticed a small crack in the side of my melamine mold. During the night, the crack had grown, and nearly all of the expensive epoxy had leaked out onto my workshop floor. It was a sticky, blue nightmare. The epoxy that remained in the mold had not cured properly because the volume was too low. The beautiful walnut slabs were now fused together with a half-cured, gooey mess. My heart sank. There was no easy fix for this. The wood was potentially ruined, and the epoxy was a total loss. The cause was a faulty batch of melamine. The board I used for the mold had a small internal flaw that I couldn't see. Under the pressure and chemical reaction of the curing epoxy, that flaw gave way and caused the leak. It was a gut-wrenching moment. All that planning, preparation, and money had leaked out onto the concrete. It's a helpless feeling when your materials fail you. You can do everything right, follow every step, and still end up with a disaster because of something completely outside of your control. It made me question if the project was even salvageable. This experience taught me to be extra vigilant about my materials and tools. Before a big glue-up or an epoxy pour, I now inspect everything with extreme care. I double-check my mold for any signs of weakness. I've also learned to have a backup plan. For epoxy pours, I now place the entire mold inside a secondary container, like a cheap plastic tub. That way, if a leak happens again, it's contained, and I don't lose all the epoxy. It's an extra step, but it provides peace of mind and can save a project from total ruin. So, what did I do about these disasters? For the cabinet with the crooked shelf holes, I couldn't just leave it. My solution was to stop thinking about a fix and start thinking about a design change. I couldn't re-drill the holes, so I decided to abandon the idea of adjustable shelves altogether. Instead, I cut custom-sized wooden rails and installed them permanently inside the cabinet, creating fixed shelves. I made sure these were perfectly level. It wasn't my original plan, but it was a strong and practical solution. The cabinet was saved, and honestly, no one but me would ever know it wasn't the original design. For the epoxy river table, salvaging it was a much bigger challenge. I had to spend hours carefully scraping and sanding away the gooey, uncured epoxy from the walnut slabs. It was a slow, sticky process. Then I had to re-flatten the slabs and start over. This time, I built a much stronger mold and, as I mentioned, placed it inside a containment box. The second pour was a success. As for the dining chairs, I had to remake many of the parts, but I used the opportunity to refine my process, creating better jigs to ensure every cut was perfect. It was a slow restart, but the final chairs were incredibly strong and well made because of the extra care I was forced to take. My advice for every woodworker is to embrace your mistakes. They are your greatest teachers. Don't hide them or let them defeat you. When something goes wrong, step back, take a deep breath, and look at the problem from a new angle. Can you turn that mistake into a feature? A dent or a crack can be filled with a cool colored epoxy or covered with a decorative bow tie inlay. A misaligned part might force you to come up with a more creative joinery solution. Resilience is one of the most important tools you can have in your workshop. Finally, let's build a community of support. Don't be afraid to share your fails with other woodworkers. We've all been there. Sharing your story might help someone else avoid the same mistake, and listening to others will prepare you for problems you haven't even encountered yet. Remember, woodworking isn't about being perfect. It's about creating things with your hands, learning as you go and enjoying the journey. So get out in your shop, make some sawdust, and don't be afraid to fail. That's how you become a better woodworker.